I want to tell you something most people who know me have never heard. Growing up, I was never mistreated. I was never abandoned. Every single person who took me in loved me, fed me, protected me. And yet, for most of my childhood, I carried a kind of ache I didn't have a name for. Not a bruise, not a scar, just a quiet, constant missing. This is a story about that ache, about what it does to a child growing up away from their own people, even when everyone around them is kind, and about how that quiet, invisible thing can follow you all the way into adulthood, shaping who you become long after anyone remembers it happened. If you ever felt like something in you is closed off and you don't fully know why, this one might hit close to home. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, my life changed in a way I was too young to really understand at the time. I went to live with my eldest brother. He was 24 years older than me, old enough to be more like an uncle or even a young father than a brother in the way I think of the word now. He already had his own kids by then, kids who were close to my age, kids I ended up going to school with, growing up alongside, like we were siblings ourselves. I remember one day in particular. I was around 11 years old, and my school shoe was wearing out, falling apart. Honestly, I needed a new pair. It should have been the simplest thing in the world to say, but I remember how timid I felt just working up the courage to tell my sister-in-law. When I finally did, she laughed and said, "Is an 11-year-old child not wise enough?" I mean any harm by it. It was said almost jokingly, the kind of thing said in passing. But I still remember exactly how small I felt in that moment. Not because she was cruel. She wasn't. But because something as basic as needing new shoes felt like a huge, terrifying request to make. I wasn't asking my mother. I wasn't asking someone who was unconditionally, automatically responsible for me. I was asking to be seen and hoping I wouldn't be a burden. That's such a small moment on its own. But looking back, it tells you everything about what it's like being a child who has to measure every need before expressing it, even something as simple as shoes. On the surface, it probably looked like I had a normal childhood. I had a roof. I had food. I had other children around me. I even had a kind of family structure. But there was always this quiet awareness sitting underneath everything, that these weren't my siblings. This wasn't my mother's house. My parents were somewhere else. My actual brothers and sisters were somewhere else. And I was here. I don't think I even had the words for it back then. I just knew there was a gap. Around 2011, things changed again. I left my brother's house and went to live with a completely different family, people who, by blood, had no obligation to me at all. We weren't related, not even distantly. And here's the part one really want people to sit with. They took me in like I was their own. No one in that house was ever wicked to me. Not once. I want to be completely clear about that, because this isn't a story about mistreatment. It's not a story about abuse or neglect. If anything, it's the opposite. I was shown real love by people who had every reason not to bother. And that's exactly what made the ache so confusing. Because how do you explain to anyone, or even to yourself, that you can be loved, cared for, safe, and still feel like something is missing? How do you explain a loneliness that has nothing to do with how anyone is treating you and everything to do with who isn't there? There's no bruise to point to, no incident to blame, just a quiet space where your own people should have been. I want to step outside the story for a second and talk to you directly, because this is really the point of this whole video. When a child grows up away from their own people, even in a loving home, something happens quietly in the background. You start to adapt in ways nobody teaches you and nobody notices. You learn to keep things to yourself because you're not always sure whose space you're really in. You learn to observe before you open up because home has shifted more than once, and some part of you is always slightly on guard. You learn to be self-sufficient early, emotionally, not just practically, because reaching out for something you don't have access to, your own mother, your own siblings, your own history, simply isn't an option. None of this is dramatic. No one around you would even necessarily notice it happening. But it accumulates, quietly, year after year, and it doesn't just disappear when you grow up. This is the heart of the message. Say it plainly and let it land. I am, to this day, a fairly reserved and private person, conserving, even Someone who holds a lot in, who doesn't easily let people all the way in. For a long time, I thought that was just my personality, just who I am. But when I trace it back, I can see the thread. That reservedness didn't come from nowhere. It was built, piece by piece, in those years of being loved well by people who weren't mine, while quietly missing the people who were. If there's a child in your life right now who's living away from their parents or siblings, whether it's a school, family circumstances, or anything else, please understand something. They might look completely fine. They might even be fine, in the sense that they are safe and cared for. But there can still be a quiet emotional weight sitting underneath all of that, one they may not have the words to explain, especially at that age. Check in, not just on their needs, but on their belonging. Ask them how they feel, not just how they are doing. Give them space to miss people out loud, without making them feel guilty for it or ungrateful for the care they're receiving elsewhere. And if you're an adult now, listening to this, and something in this story feels familiar, if you've always wondered why you're the closed-off one, the one who struggles to let people in, the one who's fiercely independent almost to a fault, it might be worth asking yourself where that really started. Not to blame anyone, not even to blame the situation, just to understand yourself a little better. Sometimes the quietest wounds are the ones that shape us the most, precisely because no one, including us, ever named them. This is the kind of story I want this channel to tell. Not just folk tales passed down from generation to generation, though those matter deeply too, but real human stories. The kind that make you feel a little less alone in something you thought only you carried. If this story meant something to you, or if it reminded you of your own experience growing up away from your people, I'd genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want to be here for the stories I have coming next, some traditional, some personal, all rooted in truth, hit subscribe. This is only the beginning.